This presentation was taken from a presentation that was done by Stephanie Graham-Rivas and Lisa Usher-Stats at the recent California Math Network meeting in Southern California that I helped them prepare, so I stole some of their slides. Did I mess up?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It should be okay.
Okay, so cooking with data. Data helps you identify disproportionate gaps, select a focus area for you to work and prioritize the steps of an action plan. So if you're going to cook with data, effective and productive use of data requires that you disaggregate, longitudinate, and cross-tabulate, or find somebody who can help you arrange data in that way. So an example of disaggregated data, that's where we separate data by race so that we can see whether or not there are gaps. And longitudinated data, which is a made-up word, right? But it's data, looking at data over time, again, so you can see patterns and whether or not there are any gaps in the data. And then cross-tabulated data is where you do comparisons across multiple data sets so that you can see, again, whether or not there are disproportionate gaps. But it's also important what kind of data that we look at. So it's important that if we're really going to close gaps, that we look at three types of data: achievement data, access data, and opportunity data. So this next slide represents the K-16 STEM pipeline that leads to STEM careers, and we want to look at this data over these different, across this pipeline, right? So examples of achievement data: CST data, CELT data, pass rates, SAT, ACT exams, AP exams, KC pass rates, GPAs, and completion rates in high school. Examples of access data include access to high-quality teachers, graduation rates, dropout rates, A through G course enrollment, or remedial course track rates. And then opportunity data looks at how safe and healthy schools are, whether or not there are enrichment activities, whether or not AP courses are offered, whether or not students have research opportunities or mentorship opportunities at the university level. So examples of achievement data: SAT scores, again, disaggregated by race so that we can see the gaps, right? "15 seconds is kind of long, right?" Okay, so an example of access data: AP exam takers, again, disaggregated by race so we can see what the gaps are, where the differences are. And then opportunity data, an example of opportunity data are suspension rates, again, disaggregated by race, because if the student's suspended and they're not in class, that means they don't have an opportunity to learn, right? But we also have to be careful about how data is presented, because sometimes it can be misleading. You can look at this data and say, well, over this particular period of time, African American students actually outperformed white students, right? So it's important that we do this disaggregating, because when we do that, we'll see that while there was growth, the gaps stayed the same. And so it's not that we want to do this, we want to do this, right? We want to close the gaps while everybody's improving. So some questions to think about. To what extent are you aware of and concerned about achievement gaps, about achievement, access, and opportunity gaps in your school and in your district? To what extent are your colleagues and other stakeholders aware of and concerned about these gaps? And lastly, what might you do to accelerate understanding and the capacity for closing gaps in your school and or district and or county? So I want to close by a quote from Reverend Martin Luther King that says, "We're faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We're confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. We must move past indecisiveness to action." Thank you.